It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you all to this roundtable conversation and an opportunity to talk to a friend of mine and colleague, Nicole Runyon. She's a licensed clinical social worker with over 20 years of experience specializing in child and adolescent mental health. She's also the author of Coming Out Tomorrow, Free to Fly, The Secret to Fostering Independence in the Next Generation. So that's a book that provides parents with real strategies to raise confident and independent children in today's digital age. So Nicole began her career in private practice. She was working directly with children and decided recently to make a broader impact. She really needed to engage with parents and educators directly. And that realization has led her to transition into speaking engagements, coaching and writing, and focusing on empowering parents to navigate the challenge of raising kids in this pervasive influence of technology. And I'm really happy to hear her today because she really brings real world insights into how to set boundaries, how to foster independence, understanding the developmental needs of children. So giving us parents who don't have a psychotherapy background, some real frameworks for understanding what their needs are. And through this work, Nicole will help to, along with all of us who are working with kids in one way or another, to address the mental health crisis affecting today's youth and hopefully empowering and equipping parents with the tools and knowledge to support their children's growth effectively. So I welcome you today for this conversation. The focus of it is Nicole's book that is coming out tomorrow. I encourage you all to look for Free to Fly. And just again, Nicole is available for speaking engagements. If you have book clubs that maybe you want to read the book and then have Nicole come and do a Q&A. She can explain what it is that she loves doing, but she's just a fierce advocate for empowering parents. And I guess that's what we really share in common is parents have truly more power than they realize. And power is kind of a scary word sometimes for people. It sounds like this very, authoritarian word. Nicole and I don't mean it that way. We mean it in the authoritative sense of the word, which I'm sure you'll talk about, which is a parenting style, which says, hey, you actually need us kids to be there for you to provide structure and guidance. But within that structure and guidance, you do have choices. And that's a really important component of that parenting style and co-creating an environment that is most optimal. I told you I would really work on not messing up my words. Most optimal for kids to develop. And that's where those of us who are coaches really come from too, which is co-creating the right environment and the right measures and focusing on what really matters. So thank you so much. We're going to let Nicole kick it off and we'll do some brief intros though before we hand it over to you, Nicole. Randy, Rob, and Alina are here to join us today. And if you wouldn't mind, just tell us why you showed up at this roundtable. I'll start with you, Alina, and then Randy, and then Rob.
Well, I'm an educator that works with kids, different kids with different variety of abilities that show up in my studio for different reasons. And I sometimes encounter kids who are neurodivergent, and I also parent a neurodivergent child, and I thought it's just a great opportunity to learn and listen and hear and educate myself.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Randy.
Yeah, so thank you. So Nicole and I had a one-to-one last week, and I thought very highly of her and the technology that she has. And I got that LinkedIn, message to connect. And I said, okay, you know what? Like I said earlier, I have 6 grandchildren ranging from 9 to 12 days. One of the 6 is today's her birthday. She's 2 years old. So there's stuff going on, and these kids, like my kids and my daughter-in-law and son-in-laws, it's not easy bringing up kids, and I just want to learn the technology of how to be a better grandparent if I can be.
That's awesome. Thank you, Randy. It's so great that you're here. And Rob, what about you?
Thanks, Allison. I have a 9-year-old boy, and I'm always interested in improving, perfecting my parenting skills, understanding the lives and reality of kids these days, and understanding the world that they're growing up in and will exist in. So I got the invite from Nicole, and whenever I get something from Nicole, my ears perk up. I got her book, and I'm interested in it coming out tomorrow.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you to the audience that watches this later once the recording goes up. I know that I get a lot of positive feedback from people who really appreciate hearing from other parents and hearing specific strategies to support raising neurodivergent kids. It is a huge joy, but it can also be an exhausting challenge to raise intense and complex people, especially in today's world. So thank you for joining us. And Nicole, I'll hand it over to you. It's so great to see you again.
It's great to see you too. This is really fantastic. I love this roundtable idea. I love that we're all in a group here talking. Thank you all for being here and sharing why you're here. And I'm really excited to talk, not just me talk at you. So that's really cool because I do a lot of these webinars or podcasts and it's a lot of just me talking. So I love the conversation. And so, yeah, Allison, you really did a great job introducing my work, my book, and really the root causes for why I wrote the book in the first place. I really do inherently want parents to believe that we all have way more power than we think. And power, yes, in the sense of, no, it's not that we tell the kids what to do and they do it. Power in the sense that we can't just put our hands up, shrug our shoulders and say, well, this is just what's happening in the world and we can't do anything about it. And this is what the kids are doing. And yes, it's harming them, but it's what everybody's doing. That is just, to me, unacceptable. It's not fair to our kids. It's not right for our kids. We really do need to stand in our authority and acknowledge that we, with our connection with our children, have a lot more influence over them than we realize. And what we've done is we've allowed the outside world, media, social media, have more of an influence on our kids than we do. And I think that inherently that's because we've been told from the very beginning of parenting that we don't know everything, that we have to defer to experts, that we have to read all the books, that we have to do all the things to make sure that we are good parents. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think we all have some learning to do. Nobody gets out of their childhood unscathed. And I think we all want to do better than our parents. And that's the goal, is to raise the next generation better than we were raised. So the education is okay, but I think we've gone so far in that direction of we don't know anything and the experts do, that now we've just allowed ourselves to put our hands up and resign that this is what's happening and there's nothing we can do about it. So yeah, that is really at the core of my work. And I like to say that I was doing private practice with kids for 20 years. And in my private practice, I mean, I literally was like underneath the ground. I'm in the lower level of my office building. And so it's like I was living under a rock for 20 years because I didn't really, I tried to network with other therapists in my community. Yes, I talked to them, but I wasn't online. I didn't know, what people were saying. I knew what I was doing and I knew what was right for me and my practice and my clients. And now that I've kind of emerged into more of an online presence and meeting people and hearing things, I'm a lot of it shocked of what's happened in the neurodivergent community in that conversation. And this is why I appreciate Allison, you and your work, because it really has challenged me to do a deep dive into how we're looking at technology use with kids who struggle with executive functioning, anxiety, depression, and we're putting it under this umbrella of they have a diagnosis, they have a pathology, and the technology is their lifeline. They needed the technology. It helps them regulate. It helps them calm. If a child is socially awkward or socially unsure, then social media is good for them, is the narrative, because they can, this is a way for them to connect because they have a hard time connecting in person. And this is where I say I was like living under a rock, because I'm shocked that this is the conversation. And I think a lot of this is actually a result of so much technology use and a disconnection in the family, a disconnection in the community, because what the technology is doing is, well, a lot of things, but particularly for the neurodivergent brain, it's hyper focusing and honing in on something that's actually quite overstimulating. And what we're finding is that in all kids, gray matter is not developing like it needs to. And gray matter is responsible for sensory processing and some executive functioning tasks like memory and critical thinking and some cognition. And so already kids are at a disservice because that isn't fully developed in them. And then the technology is increasing that lack of development. And so then what happens is we start seeing these symptoms that we see in kids with autism, sensory issues, dysregulation, anxiety, kids with ADD, lack of attention and focus. And sometimes the technology is either causing these issues or exacerbating these issues. And we can say that the child is calm when they're on it and it's helping them and it's doing the job that it's doing, but it's actually making these symptoms worse. So I always like to think of it like what's the baseline without the tech? And then look at the baseline and then see how the child can interact in the world and engage, and how parents can help with different modalities for them. And then you kind of see, okay, is it neurological, or is this actually being caused by the disconnect and the too much technology? So I really do appreciate this conversation. I don't get into it much because my main conversation is with parents whose kids actually shouldn't be pathologized, shouldn't be labeled, and shouldn't be in therapy. Because when I help the parents, I help the environment. And then when the kid kind of goes back into the environment, the kid changes, and then we don't see any of the symptoms that they were coming to therapy for, they were pathologized for. So I would like to say, I'm not talking about kids who were set up to have issues. I'm talking about kids who literally have issues because of the erosion of the family, the erosion of the community, and frankly, the erosion of the education system, because now we don't just have smart devices in kids' pockets. We have devices literally in front of them in school all day long, starting as young as preschool.
So true. And you raised so many good points, Nicole. I would love to just touch on one of the ones you made just in the last minute or so, and that's on the environment. You were talking about returning a child to an environment where if you had not been working with the parents, they're going back into an environment that is maybe not helpful for them to be regulated, right? And so it's really important to work with the parent as you are now so that the parent can go back empowered to create a good environment for the child. The environment is also a factor in school, especially for neurodivergent children. And I in particular work with the highly profoundly gifted autistic and ADHD, and there's often a lot of overlap between those three. If we have an environment that feels, like conformity is prioritized, where the work is tedious and perhaps not differentiated enough for them so that it's not interesting at all, it doesn't provide any value. And I would just point people to a 2015 paper, a white paper showing that 1 in 5 American students in 5th grade enter the school year already having mastered the material. And that's a generalization, right? But it's a Johns Hopkins study, more so for reading, a little bit less so for math, but roughly 2% of kids are 4 years ahead in math in 5th grade. So we're looking at somewhere between, 2 to 3% to 20% of the kids are really not being well served by the standard fare in education today. And then you throw the pandemic on top of that. So remember, that was 2015 report, then the pandemic, the learning loss, and now the focus on trying to catch kids up, rightly so. But what about good differentiation for those who were never behind? They're actually ahead. Now we have these kids coming home dysregulated from school. School doesn't feel like a place of respect for them, where they don't feel like they have any agency, no autonomy. So no wonder devices and the need for dopamine is so strong to try to recover from that very bad environment. Parents don't actually realize just how much they could influence the school environment. So I work with parents too. I work with kids and with parents, but often in an advocacy role, informing parents about how to effectively advocate with the school for a better environment, so we don't see them having this, really terrible impact on their ability to regulate simply because they're not actually in school learning. They're just surviving. They're trying to figure out how to manage their emotions through a day and get to the other side. Then they go to bits. What are your thoughts about that, Nicole, and the impact that you've seen of education environment on the kids?
I think that, 100%. I fully agree with what you're saying. And I actually think it's not, that environment isn't just affecting the gifted children or the neurodivergent children with autism or ADD. I think that school isn't adaptable really to any kid, particularly boys. And I know you mentioned before we got on that this is, National Boys Day. I always miss these milestone things. Every day is something, right?
One of my friends let me know that, yeah. Oh, yeah. Interesting, yes.
Okay, great. So good timing,
Yeah.
because I think from very early on, boys are wired to move, to play, to get all that energy out, and school does not encourage that. In fact, it's encouraging that less and less because recess times are being cut, PE is being cut. So more and more of these programs that allow children to move throughout the day are just not there. And even in the way of, people don't realize, we take for granted that all of us on this call learned how to write literally with our hands from a pen to a paper. That stimulates the brain. There you go. Thank you, Randy. We all have a pen available, right? I've got one right here. Because I don't type my notes when I'm on calls. I write them. And that actually is necessary for kids under 6 because the bones in their hands don't fuse together fully until they're 6. And so they really need that dexterity and that movement to be able to write. They also need their eyes to track from left to right. So they need actual books, because if they're on the computer, or like a smaller screen, their eye isn't fully going to go all the way from one end to another. And that actually wires the brain to process information to auditory and visual information to the brain, as well as auditory if they're listening more to somebody's voice. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make is the less movement they have, the more technology time they have, we're seeing more and more kids not able to get through the day. And how the schools are responding to this is through this conversation around mental health and social emotional learning. And now they're building in these mental health curriculums into the school program. And two issues I have with that. One is that's not what they're good at. And they're frankly not good at it. That's not what they do. And then the other piece of it is we wouldn't need all of that if we simply went back to letting kids move more. Just that would change so much, and not relying so much on technology for education. Now, I'm not anti-tech. I'm not saying kids should never learn how to use technology in school. I'm saying that should be like in a computer class in that context, or in a technology class or a STEM class, but not have the device be used for every single thing, for reading, writing, math. Those things should be done with actual physical movement.
Or even learning via video, which happens in a lot of classrooms too. Teachers teaching. You've made so many interesting points, Nicole. One of them that I've heard you talk about before, which might be helpful to bring in here, is developmental stages for children and what they really need. I think you've mentioned, a really key point around age 9. I'm wondering if that would be helpful to share with any parents who haven't heard that yet.
Yeah. This is my favorite thing to talk about. It's because so many parents don't know about it. It's called the 9-year change. And it can happen as early as 8.5. My youngest was pretty mature, so I started seeing signs of it at 8.5. And it's the second point in childhood where children emotionally begin to individuate and separate from their parents. The first point is 2, which much of us understand as the terrible 2s, because that's the no and the I will not. And then the next one is 16, So 9 is a time when a child develops a consciousness around themselves as an individual outside of the family. So they start to see themselves as like, this is who I am, and I'm a small person, and I'm in a big world. And that can cause some anxiety. And that anxiety is not pathological at all. It's actually quite normal because all of a sudden, friends become more important. They want to please their teachers. They start to get involved in more organized activities. And then there's some other adult that's in a position to teach them something, and they're interested in performing well and doing well. And so that's going to bring a little bit of fear, like a consciousness of, oh, okay, here I am. Am I okay? And that begins that crisis of consciousness of adolescence, of am I okay? So most people think adolescence doesn't start till middle school, and we don't really need to be concerned about how they view themselves in relation to other people until then. But it really does start this young. And this is a time when independence is very, very necessary, because it's the cure for the anxiety. And once they start to be given a task, be trusted with a task, be told, hey, you can do this. And I don't mean just throw them in the deep end and make them swim. You can teach them and show them and kind of hold their hand through it, and then say, here, this is something you can do now. I always like to say cooking is a really good thing in this age range, because they're old enough to have the dexterity to use a knife and make sure they don't burn themselves and keep themselves safe in the kitchen. But at the end of that, you've actually produced something that is pleasing to other people, and that's nurturing and loving, and that can feel really good for a kid who's beginning to separate and feeling a little anxious about it. And what I notice in this age range is that so many kids get smart devices. And it's because parents start to get scared about not being with their kids all the time. Like I said, this tends to be when organized activities kind of ramp up, and parents really think that the world is unsafe, like out in the world, when actually really the online world is what's not safe that we're finding. That's where the predators are, and they're in kids' spaces, and they're grooming kids under their parents' roofs. But parents still, I think that kids being away from them isn't safe, so they're giving smart devices. And this is not a good time, because that anxiety needs to be worked through, and that crisis needs to be worked through of, I'm sad about growing up. And again, with the independence being the cure, they can get to the other side of that. If they have a device that's distracting them, that's shooting dopamine in their brain constantly, they're not going to get to the other side of it. And I can tell you, my practice around 2014, 2015, I saw an influx of adolescent girls in particular with major mental health issues. Like, they were coming out of the hospital after their first suicide attempts and seeing me as like the follow-up care. And these were not kids who had trauma. There was sure things to work on in the family, but nothing that would warrant what I was seeing. And I would do the deep dive into, okay, where did this start? What's going on? And almost all of those cases were a result of anxiety right around 3rd grade. And all of those kids were getting devices in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So by middle school, they weren't able to get to the other side of it, and it exacerbated that anxiety. It made it worse, and it made them feel that they weren't capable. And the kids today, what I notice a lot of is they're suicidal because the only way out of something hard for them is to die, because no one has ever shown them that they're capable of so much more, and they can get to the other side of doing hard things.
Wow, that's very compelling insight that you have from your own practice, and also a really beautiful way of normalizing anxiety as being developmentally appropriate. And it concerns me too that we've been pathologizing so many things that are actually developmentally necessary and appropriate, and that suffering and difficulty is essential to growing. And I do think you're right about that, empowering the parents and supporting them through those stages. I heard something from a mom the other day that I would love to ask you about. So the mom was recognizing that, the son, this is true for so many parents of, high school boys. Son is not doing the homework, and, just the grades are slipping, and it sleeps a lot and not really sure what to do. He has a smartphone, of course. And the mom said, maybe we're just too lenient on him. But at the same time, these parents are in a bind because the kids are getting their licenses. They're getting ready to move away from home potentially. And the parents are feeling like, I can speak to it for our family too. When there are computers and devices in the home, you already feel this loss of connection creeping up over years where, in the past, there wouldn't have been so much separation between the family members, everybody doing their own thing. So I think the parents are really sensitive to, like, the kids have their own things that they can do to occupy themselves. They don't really need me. And they're sensing that separation within the home before they even leave the home. So they don't want to exercise any sort of, authority or create boundaries or structure because they don't want to disrupt or fracture the relationship because it feels precarious before it's time. Am I making any sense? Like, they feel this sensitivity to loss before the loss even happens, before the child even leaves. What do you say to parents about providing boundaries and structure so the kids can, get schoolwork done, get enough sleep, to be able to drive safely, all of that? What do you say to these parents who are like, I wonder if I'm too lenient, but at the same time doesn't want to be the bad guy?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. That is 100% spot on. And that really is the second pillar of what I talk about, because I don't think it's just the tech. I think that the tech is a really easy modality to keep the kids comfortable, but ultimately it's the parents who are struggling to be uncomfortable with their children's discomfort. And that's been going on for decades, really. And so it's manifesting in these older teenagers who are not launching or not motivated to sort of do things on their own, like most of us on this call likely were. I mean, you could not stop me from doing independent things. The second that I was able to, I was out and like leave them in the dust. And I love them and they're great people, but peace out, guys. And we're not seeing that in the kids today because very early on, we're having parents who are overworked. Most families are dual income. Both parents are working. They're stressed out. They're burnt out. We're expected to be everything to our kids now. They're entertainers, right? Because like kids no longer are just playing outside, and you can't just say, oh, go play outside with your friends. Parents are falling all over themselves to make sure that their kids get, high school, college scholarships for sports. So if their kid plays a sport, all of a sudden it becomes a travel sport where you're having to go away every weekend and stay in a hotel. And so essentially parents, when they have the little bit of time left with their kids, they say mothers have 120 minutes a day with their kids. Fathers have less, like around 85 minutes a day. So when there's this little bit of time together, parents want their kids to be happy. They don't want conflict. I call it a Disney day. Anytime we have those, whatever those moments or those days or weekends or holidays with our kids, we feel like we have to take them to the park and the amusement and the carnival. And rather than acknowledging that our role with them is sometimes, especially when they're teenagers, sometimes it's to be that, solid person that's standing in our authority and saying no, or saying this is what's good for you, or this is what you need. And that is love.